My name is Ralph Schoenman, and I'm chair of the Publicity and Communications Committee of the Million Worker March. I'm a fellow journalist, the producer of a radio program called Taking Aim on Pacifica Network's WBAI in New York and KPFA in Berkeley, and I'm a director of the Center for Independent Communication, so I welcome you as colleagues to this press conference. Let me first inform you that the Million Worker March is a rank-and-file mobilization that draws upon the aspirations of working people to speak in their own name, around their own agenda, on an independent axis. And we've drawn our inspiration from the example of Dr. Martin Luther King, who 36 years ago invoked the necessity for working people to mobilize in their own name, having marched with the sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, having sounded the alarm of what he called a political and economic system in terminal crisis. At that time, Dr. King talked about the United States government as one of the greatest purveyors of violence on the planet. And he called upon poor people to mobilize in Washington, in their name, around their agenda. In the hall of the International Longshore Workers Union, Local 10, is a dramatic photograph of Dr. King with William B. Chester, the first African-American official of the International Longshore Warehouse Union, its international vice president. Together with Tom Berkeley, the president of the Oakland Post, in a dramatic convergence of the civil rights and the labor movement struggles for emancipation. Dr. King was made an honorary member of the International Longshore Workers Union. And it is only appropriate that the ILWU, and in particular Local 10, took this historic initiative in calling for a Million Worker March of working people, for labor and the oppressed, to mobilize in their own name, on their own agenda, without any politicians on the platform, brothers and sisters, to speak truth to power. There has been an avalanche of support from all sectors of the labor movement, not only the International Longshore Workers Union, whose national caucus endorsed all locals from San Diego to Anchorage, and the Teamsters. And we'll be introducing Brother Chris Silvera, national chairman of the Teamsters National Black Caucus. I would like to convey to you, by the way, the greetings and the regret of C. Thomas Kegel, the General Secretary Treasurer of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, who had hoped to be with us, but who is traveling on Teamster business in Kansas City and Minneapolis today. But Brother Kegel, from the plenary of the 29th Annual Convention of the Teamsters National Black Caucus, not only declared his support for the Million Worker March, but committed a financial contribution of $10,000 at that time as an expression of that support. That is reflective of what I call the avalanche. From the Transport Workers Union in New York to SEIU Local 1199 to District Council 1707 and District Council 37 of AFSCME, to the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, to the construction and trade councils of Central California and Northern California, to the pipe fitters and steam fitters, to the American Postal Workers Union, to the National Immigration Rights Association, to the Farm Laborers Organizing Committee, to the State Fed of South Carolina, to the Black Workers for Justice across this country, a rank and file movement, and we will speak to that. Let me convey also today greetings from Ed Asner, from Casey Kasem, from our brother Dick Gregory, who called this the most important and historic mobilization of labor and civil rights since Martin Luther King in Memphis and in Washington, D.C. Danny Glover, I am calling on everyone within reach of my voice to join me on October 17th at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. for the Million Worker March. We are uniting labor with the anti-war movement and all struggles for social justice. We demand well-paid, full-time work for all, universal health care, decent schools, social services, and an immediate end to the occupation of Iraq. Danny Glover, when Martin Luther King Jr. summoned us to march on Washington, he said that our economic and political system was in crisis. And he outlined a program for us to struggle against racism and imperial war and rampant materialism. It is far worse today. All that we have gained is under attack. Join me, brothers and sisters, on October 17th, and we shall launch a great and united movement to reshape America. It's only fitting, brothers and sisters, that our chair, our co-chair, is the former Secretary-Treasurer of the International Longshore Warehouse Union, Local 10. The man who I'm going to introduce to you represents workers along the Pacific Coast in 29 ports. He is co-chair of the Million Worker March. He is a leader of the labor movement. He is a leader of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. It's my privilege to introduce to you the real Clarence Thomas.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. And my wife is fond of saying I'm the real Clarence Thomas, that other guy is an imposter and bringing shame to the family name. But on a more serious note, I'm very proud to tell you that I represent the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10. And for those of you that are familiar with the labor movement at all, that is the local of the legendary and one of the greatest labor leaders of the 20th century, Harry Bridges. Local 10 is the most diverse local on the West Coast. It's made up predominantly of people of color. And I think that it's no accident that the Million Worker March originated from us, because if truth be told, black workers probably have the most to lose when we look at the impact of institutional racism in this country. The labor movement has represented fairness to black workers, not only to black workers, but to all workers, but in particular to black workers. And I think that it is not at all surprising that the ILWU, which represents longshoremen on the West Coast, and the Teamsters, Local 808, and its Secretary-Treasurer, Chris Silvera, who's also chair of the Teamsters National Black Caucus, those two particular unions stand as two giants, not only in the transportation industry, but in the labor movement. The names of Jimmy Hoffa and Harry Bridges loom large. So I think that when you look at the fact that the ILWU Local 10, International Brotherhood and Teamsters Local 808, it is fitting that we are in the forefront of organizing for this Million Worker March. Let me first say that labor is not monolithic. There are Democrats, Republicans, independents, and others in the trade union movement. There are workers on both sides of various issues, but there are certain things on which all workers do agree. Universal health care, protection and enhancement of Social Security, ensuring that we all have pensions for the work that we produce, a national living wage to replace the minimum wage, funding for public education, affordable housing. Those are just some of the demands that the Million Worker March Organizing Committee has put forward. The trillions of dollars that are expended on the military will not allow working people to achieve those ends. The vast sums assigned to the war and are then deployed to justify cuts in social services and the means to our survival. It is the working class that has the most at stake in any war. We fight them and we die in them. And when they are shown to be without justification, we oppose them, which is why one of our demands is an end to the occupation of Iraq and to bring the troops home now. On this, we all agree as workers. We produce the wealth of the nation. We know that we are shortchanged in every aspect of life when it comes to the returns of what we produce and what we receive from the production of wealth and profit. The Million Worker March has not been organized to challenge the leadership of various unions for the sake of challenge, whether they are international or local. These leaders were elected by their membership, and it is their membership, the rank and file, that they must answer to. The Million Worker March has been built to express the urgent demands of rank and file workers. This is a bottom-up organizing effort. And let me explain what that means. The call for the Million Worker March did not come from an international. It came from a local. And there are many in the trade union movement find that to be bold and audacious. Well, the ILWU Local 10 is bold and audacious because we come from that kind of tradition. Harry Bridges was a man who understood that discrimination was a tool of the bosses, and as such was responsible probably for the greatest number of people of color coming into the ILWU and being responsible for that. Also, Harry was a man who understood that there needs to be worker solidarity, international labor solidarity. And he also understood the importance of standing up for economic and social justice issues worldwide. It is for that reason that ILWU Local 10 in the early 1980s refused to load a ship by the name of the Ned Lloyd Kimberley that emanated from South Africa, which galvanized the labor movement against the illegitimate apartheid regime. It is that kind of history, that kind of tradition that has motivated ILWU Local 10 to make this call that is now being responded to all over the country. Just yesterday, Rainbow Push endorsed the Million Worker March. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who was probably one of the most heroic members in the House, just a couple of weeks ago, endorsed the Million Worker March. So now we have members of Congress who are endorsing. One of the main reasons that has been given for many in the labor movement, as well as those that are operatives of the Democratic Party in particular, about not supporting the Million Worker March is because of its timing. Many have said that, well, this is not the right time to organize a Million Worker March. Let's do it after the election. No matter who, if President Bush is elected, that we'll have millions of people in the streets. We remind people that when Dr. Martin Luther King proposed the March on Washington, along with A. Philip Randolph, one of the responses of then President Kennedy was that it was the wrong timing. Only working people can determine the time for them to move and organize. And I remind people that black folks did not get the right to vote by voting. Black people got the right to vote by organizing independently of the Republican and Democratic parties. Only when workers organize independently of the Republicans and Democrats do we ever receive any concessions from the system. Working people are facing some of the roughest times since the 1930s. Our cost of living, we can't keep up with the cost of living because our wages are going down while record profits are heaped upon the corporate sector. The Million Worker March has been organized to express the urgent demands of the rank and file, both organized and organized, in the face of these all-out attacks. The gains for which past generations have struggled and died are under siege. The 8-hour day, the right to strike, full-time work with pay that allows people to lead a decent life, public schools that provide education in buildings that are on the verge of collapse. One of our Longshore members who lives in the valley told us that youngsters are going to school in the Fresno area and there's not even enough toilet paper for them. Cutting programs straight across the board, leaving very little alternative for the children of the working class. 45 million people have no health care. Another 50 million have minimal coverage that does not protect them. We are mobilizing in our own name, independent of Democrats and Republicans. We are putting forward an agenda for the working class. No matter what anyone's expectations are of the upcoming national and local elections, whoever is elected must be held accountable to the majority of the working population in this country, and that's the majority of America. I don't mean to downplay the importance of race, but let's make one thing very clear. This march is class-based. There are certain things that most Americans who work for a living have in common. And that is having to get up and make a living, to be concerned about such issues as health care, to be concerned about such issues as affordable housing. That binds us all together with a common experience. That's what this march is all about. This is a march that can be supported by someone who may oppose abortion and be in favor of gun control, because the bottom line here, we as workers, we all want universal health care. We all want decent schools for our children to attend. We want to make sure that there is not a minimum wage, that there is a living wage. These are the things that all workers can agree to, no matter what their political persuasion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Brother Clarence. Operation Push, Rainbow Push, is mobilizing 40,000 recipients of their newsletter and their emails and their reports as we speak. Reverend Jesse Jackson will be speaking on October 17th, as will E. Randall Osborne, the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Foundation, who sends his greetings today. And I should mention in particular the endorsement of the National Education Association at its national convention of 12,000 delegates, representing 2.7 million workers in the United States, the largest trade union in this country, endorsing the Million Worker March. Let me just very briefly cite to you a comment by Kimball Urrutia, Executive Director of AFSCME, Vice President of District 3, Texas, AFL-CIO, and of the Harris County AFL-CIO Council. I want to inform the committee that I will be endorsing the march, as will AFSCME Local 1550, and I speak as Vice President of District 3 on the Texas AFL-CIO Executive Board. Workers in Texas need to have their voices heard, and I would not be fulfilling my obligation to them as a union leader if Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico were not endorsing and participating in this powerful stance. Across this country, there is an avalanche of support for working people to mobilize in their own name. I'm about to introduce to you our own Sojourner Truth, our own Mother Courage. Brenda Stokely is not only the president of District 1707 of AFSCME, representing daycare workers and human services, she is a co-convener of the Million Worker March, and she is one of the most dedicated and eloquent and passionate and powerful leaders of the labor movement and of the struggle for emancipation of the oppressed in this country. It's a proud privilege to introduce Sister Brenda Stokely.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I can't even begin to express really the kind of support that we're getting. I mean, Clarence and both Ralph spoke about that in terms of some of the endorsements, but I just want to give you a glimmer of some of it. This past Saturday, we were invited to District Council 37 that represents all the municipal employees in New York City, one of the largest unions in New York City, to a political action conference for one of their largest locals, 1549, that represents all the clerical workers. This conference focused primarily on people getting on board and organizing themselves to support Carrie, as well as do some other precinct work. After one of the leaders of the district council spoke about the Million Worker March and spoke particularly about the timing, that it was very important for workers to show their strength so that anyone who is going to represent us understands the issues, the agenda of working people, and understands that we are a powerful force. After we spoke, we ran out of sheets of paper for people to sign up to get on the bus. We ran out of buttons, we ran out of t-shirts. There were stacks of papers for people to do other things, like voters registration. People took those and other things. But the enthusiasm and the spark from the speech, to me, indicates that people feel that there isn't a space, or there wasn't a space until Local 10 put out the call for this march. There was not a space for working people to have their voices heard and say their own agenda in their own voices and stand up on their own 2 feet to let people know what is bothering them and what they want to see to correct stuff. People are tired, sick and tired of having other people make empty, lying promises to them that after they get in office, whatever level of government, because you're not sufficiently organized, you can't hold those people accountable. Because you're not sufficiently organized, the people who get in office who are sincere either get lost in the shuffle, get isolated, or they get co-opted. And people are, New York is very sophisticated. They've had all kinds of organizations, all kinds of marches, all kinds of flyers. They see them on a daily basis like they do down here in DC. So not too much really impresses people in New York. So if you see the average person on the street taking a flyer, not putting it in the trash can at the next corner, coming back and getting more flyers. If you can walk from my house to the train and have everybody in my block that has a store, cleaners, a bodega, saying that they're willing to put the poster up, and it needs to be up so that everybody can see it and come to the march. When you can call church leaders who say, I want you to come to our congregation, speak to them. When you can go to my union here in June of this year, we had our convention. There was an attempt to squash the discussion. Clarence was there, Ralph was there, and others were there. They wanted to squash the discussion on the Million Worker March because they felt the support that was developing. On the 30th, we're going to the Executive Council meeting. But many councils and locals are now on board that are in AFSCME. So it tells you something. People are not stupid. People are not unclear what their agenda is and what it should be in this country. People are not unclear about the problems, and they don't need other people to speak for them. They want a space where they can say, this is what we need, this is how you can get it, and we want it. I was in Cuba a few years ago, and I compared what happened in Cuba to what has happened here in the United States. We fought years and years for the Family Medical Leave Act. And we got it without any money. So only certain workers can go on use family medical leave because it's without pay. And the only thing you're guaranteed is your job, and you're guaranteed health insurance if the employer was providing it. I sat in a union delegate meeting in Cuba, in Havana, and the workers debated all the things that they need to do in their country to help workers. The female delegates and some male delegates got up and said, we need to extend maternity leave for a year, paid maternity leave. This was on a Sunday. They debated all the things that they need to do, and they said, no, we still want a year's paid maternity leave. On Monday, it was implemented. Why is it in the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the world, with all the resources, capability, technology, intelligence, that we cannot do the same thing? And the answer to that, for me, is that we have not been the ones fighting for it ourselves. We've had somebody else being our mouthpiece. We've had somebody else organizing and lobbying for us. We've had somebody else telling us not to march, not to speak, not to talk. This march is telling people, hell no, we're not following that failed strategy anymore. We're going to build a movement that represents the majority of the people. None of us would be sitting here eating the food, dressing in the clothes that we have, sitting on the chairs that we have, getting on the train down here, or the buses, or riding your cars, if it wasn't for a working person who made that possible for you to do that. So if that is the case, that we make it possible for people to live, that means we have the right to live decently. That means that our agenda must be the main agenda here in this country because it's in the interest of the majority of the people. Healthcare is not just for working people. And we're the only industrialized country that doesn't have national healthcare. Why is that? Because we don't have the resources, because we don't have the intelligence, that we don't have the mechanism to do it. We already have a single payer program that's Medicaid and Medicare. Why can that not be extended to the people that make it possible for you to sit on a chair and for you to eat and go to the grocery store, buy clothes? Why is it not possible for our children not to have to go and kill other people in order to get 3 square meals, a roof over their head, and clothing and health care? That's the only place many of them can get that, and a job. And the job is to kill other people. We're saying that is not an agenda that's in our interest. We're saying that our money that we pay for dues, and those of us who are fortunate enough to be organized, that we don't want our money to be going to wealthy individuals who are going to lie to us about what they're going to do when they get in office. If that money cannot be used for the agenda of working people, then maybe we need to rethink, relook, and reorient organized labor. Organized labor has disregarded the fact that many workers, including immigrant workers, people of color, people in the South, have not been organized. And whose advantage has that been? It's been to the advantage of very wealthy people, because they can go down South and exploit people because they have no organized effort to prevent that from happening. They can get tax write-offs. They can get infrastructures built where there are black communities in North Carolina that don't even have sewage infrastructure and don't have roads, but you're going to build a plant down in North Carolina, you can get all that instantaneously. There are people in Harlem that don't have housing. Somebody wants to set up a business in Brooklyn over the Atlantic terminal area. Instantaneously. We can find the money, we can find the resources, we can build the structure. Something is upside down here. This movement is going to turn it back up to where it needs to be. Something is very sorry and wrong in this country, and this movement is going to address that. And we're not going to just have people speaking, and we're not going to just have people marching. We're going to have organizing tents so that when people leave there, they're going to be leaving with their heads on straight and connected to other people who are organizing around issues. So we hope that all of you come, and I'm going to send a message to the press. I hope that you report what this march is truly about. And I hope with your hearts and your minds you understand what this march is about, and that when you report, that you report with integrity and with justice in the front of your heads. Thank you.